Just as human relationships can grow and can deepen, or they can stagnate, or they can never begin in the first place, or they can begin and then fall apart if the two people involved aren't both willing to cooperate to keep that relationship going. Human relationships can grow and deepen, and human relationships can become distant and can fall apart. Well, what happens when our prayer relationship with God stagnates or never grows or hardly begins? What happens in that prayer relationship? Well, if that prayer relationship doesn't grow, deepen, mature, become strong and stable, then what's going to happen to any knowledge we may have of Catholic teaching? What's going to happen to any of the grace that we go forward to receive, perhaps Sunday after Sunday? What's going to happen to the way we actually express this life in our moral life? What's going to happen to all of those things? Well, they will reflect they will reflect that relationship. If the relationship is shallow, then our expression of the relationship will not be as deep and vibrant, as beautiful as it should be. Anyone remember the gospel reading this morning, if you've gone to Mass already? The gospel reading this morning from Mark's gospel, and Jesus sent out the church in Mark's account of it. He sent them out to preach the gospel to the whole creation. He sent them out to preach the gospel. In Matthew, we have a little bit more detail about what he sent them to do. He sent them, in Matthew's account, to make disciples of all the nations, he said, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you. And so he sent them out with a big plate. He sent them out to pass on the entire creed. Pass on everything that I have given you. Pass it on. Make disciples and pass on the full truth of God. Pass on the full truth of this creation that I've entrusted to you. Pass that on. Enable them to be disciples. Enable them to be growing faithful disciples. Enable them to receive my life through the grace that I give you in the sacraments. Open the floodgates of heaven that my grace might pour out upon all who would receive it. Help them to understand how to walk in this world so that unbelievers can say, look at those people, look at those Christians. They live a righteous life. They're not corrupt. They're not cheating each other. They're not abusing one another. Heaven help us when those in the church do those things. And there are cases, we all know about them. They're heartbreaking. Cases of corruption and sin in the church. It's a horrible thing. God help us, and God enable us to repent and to live in a righteous life. But God sent them out to walk in that relationship that is enabled in prayer. And we heard about that this morning from this beautiful reading of Mark's Gospel. Take the gospel, the full living gospel, to the whole creation. But every relationship begins somewhere in our life of prayer, the prayer that we are actually practically living today. So, for example, if I were to have time and go to each of you, well, it's a personal thing, you wouldn't want to just blurt it out in public, but if I were to ask you, or if I were to ask you to ask yourself, how is your prayer life today? How is it? And then you might think for a while, and you would respond in some way. Okay. Whatever your prayer life is today, it's intended to grow. Just as every relationship you have can grow, this one is intended to grow. And so I'm going to take some time to talk about how our prayer life can grow specifically in detail. But please let me try to make that point, stress that point. that wherever we are in our prayer life, God is calling us into a deeper relationship with Him in prayer. And the deeper our relationship with Him is in prayer, then the more relevant will be every single teaching and doctrine and dogma that we learn or could ever learn about the Catholic life. We will begin to see the beauty of that truth as our relationship with God grows. As that relationship with God grows, the relevance, the dynamism, the life of our sacraments will become more and more clear to us. We will know what we're receiving when we go forward in Eucharist because we will know that we're receiving God, and we will be learning more about God. Our love for God will be deepening because our relationship with Him will be deepening. And questions of moral life, what ought I to do and what ought I not to do? Should I participate in this thing? Should I back away from this because there's something wrong about it? There's something immoral about it. Should I get away from that? Those questions will begin to take a real, personal value and importance to us. Why? Because to live an immoral life in any way whatsoever is an insult to the person with whom we are in relationship, a loving relationship that is deepening. It gets personal, in other words. Religion gets personal. And that's what it's supposed to do. Because if it isn't personal, what in the world is this all about? You know, is it just a club? Just learning words? No. It's about truth. It's about life. It's about why we're here. And it's about the God to whom we're called in relationship. So, under good relationships are intended to grow. Our prayer relationship with God is intended to grow. And I have here four forms of prayer. Notice, vocal prayer, and then Christian meditation, then the prayer of simplicity, and then 4 higher forms of prayer. So I want to go through these and talk about them for a bit. But as I'm going through these 4, please keep in mind and try to make correlation, as I will. Try to make correlation between these stages of prayer, and that's what they are. They're stages. These are not like forms of prayer, so that one day I might wake up and say, well, I think I'm going to pray the prayer of simplicity today. Or wake up and it's not like, what are you going to have for supper tonight? Or I think I'll pray Christian meditation today. I'm kind of bored with vocal prayer. No, that's not the way it is. But these are grades of prayer, so that a person begins with vocal prayer, and then if he's faithful in vocal prayer will begin to mature and deepen, and he will be drawn into a deeper prayer life, which is characterized by Christian meditation. Something deeper that grows out of vocal prayer. And similarly, the prayer of simplicity is not something that you would just decide to do, but rather it's something that is the fruit of meditation. It's something that grows out of meditation when meditation has been faithfully encountered and engaged for some period of time, typically. And number 4, contemplation is something even more developed. So we'll talk about this. So prayer usually begins with vocal prayer. And so notice in our human relationships, the relationship usually begins with conversation, right? Vocal prayer, conversation with God. All relationships typically begin with a conversation. Hey, how are you doing? Nice weather we're having. Well, that's kind of analogous to vocal prayer, formula vocal prayer.